Friends, yesterday we have discussed about stimuli, and we have seen that in all our behavior we can distinguish the stimuli we receive and the way we use them. And even we have discussed that what we receive may be any kind of stimulus, but only when the reaction makes we may tally with its nature and varies with it in quasi independence of uses we make of those stimuli and the references occur. Even we have talked about visual images. Visual images are somehow complex, and imagine something like a circle. We have taken that example, and visual image is something like a circle in the mind, and various different kinds of stimuli are attacking over that sphere or circle. And the pictured, the sphere, within that sphere, you will find out the pictured mechanism is continually changing. And this continuous change, which is taking place after watching that visual image, because as I said, there is certain image that is in our unconscious mind, and the visual image which we watch in front of our eyes, that particular visual image and the image which is in front of you, due to that, the image that is part of your mind started to get converted, and there is continuous change, but the change is not because of the external stimuli, because what you have imagined, what you have decided, what you have framed in your mind about that particular thing, that framed thing is somehow changing itself, and this change has given this mechanism of changing that particular thing is giving a little gateway that which stimuli to be allowed to enter inside, and we have to accept the effect of that particular stimuli with us. Now, so far as the subsequent convulsions that are taking place after watching that visual image, those convulsions are due to the nature of impact and to lingering effects of impacts which have similar impact in the past, which have similar thing that has taken place in the past. And that's why we have seen yesterday that I. Richards is saying that these convulsions are referential. And they are due to the independent motions of the internal mechanism. So this diagrammatic image may be possibly of convenience to some by those who distrust it, distrust such things, that it may with advantage be disregarded most of the time. And as we have seen it yesterday also, that all those things are not registered in neurology. and is in no way ground to what I. Richards is trying to put it, that it is not going to be part of neurology, because this is what the convulsions become reference for all the activities that you are taking, that you are watching in front of your eyes. Now, the extent of which reference is interfered, because once the reference, the mind is trying to make a certain posture, mind is trying to make certain idea, mind is trying to make certain image, and when the image is being created, at that point, which reference is interfered with by needs and desires, because everything that comes into mind, it is always having its own stimulus, and those stimulus which they carry, those stimulus, they are almost trying to create a sort of impact. And because of that, convulsions takes place, and I. Richard says those convulsions are referential. Now, the extent to which reference is interfered, which reference is making these convulsions, these impressions are being changed, why these convulsions are taking place, whether that reference is interfered by need, is it essential, that is a requirement of your things to change, or it is by desire, both the things, need and desire. And Richards is saying that these things, need and desire, which are changing, which are extent that reference is interfered because of it, that reference is underestimated always. It is always underestimated, because he is giving a very contemporary example of that particular time, that people are more skeptical in 1914 to 1918, that is the period of First World War, because this was the time when human came to know that there can be such a large destruction, people can be killed, how war will affect the whole understanding of human society. So the events that has taken place in 1914 to 1918, nobody has forgotten that event. And those who are having certain independence of opinions and desires, I. Richards is saying those are most skeptical people. Because during the time of destruction, human being is trying to get pleasure of living life with anything that is in his possession, anything that he feels that he can get, how he will perceive it, to get pleasure during the time of destruction. So I. Richards is pointing out that even most ordinary and familiar objects are perceived because it pleases them to perceive, because of the destruction, because of the things that they have seen. It is a kind of shock. You have a particular idea that the world is developing, and in this developing world you will get certain things in time, but all of a sudden its destruction takes place and everything is stopped, and people come to know that this destruction is simply because of that development. Now, those who have their own independent desire and we say that okay, we can use it, they're skeptical. And I. Richards is trying to point out that we are such type of our whole understanding, our whole setup is that we try to gain pleasure, we try to get things which are which will please us. And that's why in the duration, at the time of wars, at the time of destructions, people are even taking ordinary things which they perceive ordinary things which would please them. See now, for the last whole year, it is a kind of destruction we have seen. And we are perceiving even minor things, very ordinary things, and we feel that those ordinary things will please us. Now, whatever the condition, whatever the thing which please us, whatever shape size it may be, whether that object is having that quality to please, you are not bothered about. You are trying to get the thing, you are trying to have this particular thing because you are familiar, you are simply getting to know that it will please us, it will please you. And whenever error, some error takes place in perceiving that particular thing, this error does not directly deprive us of its advantages in perceiving that particular thing, because the external conditions are something different. Most of us have experienced that thing in recent times. When there is a lockdown, and what are the conditions before lockdown? It is said that don't use screen for a long time because it will affect your eyes, it will affect your understanding, it will affect your whole mechanism of imagination. The use of technology having its own disadvantages, but during the lockdown, during this particular phase of humanity, during this particular phase of living life, this become essential, although it is having its own disadvantages, but you have to follow this, you have to use this, knowing its disadvantages. We have used it in the time of destruction because the external situation, external condition, external things made you to follow that particular way and try to gain a familiar ordinary object which gives you a sort of pleasure, pleasant moment. We try to get it, we try to gain it. Now, it is almost impossible for everyone to secure a correct impression of his own personal appearances in or of the features of anyone in whom he is personally interested. Because you don't know what sort of impression you may have. Because I said that the visual image gives you a sort of impression to you. And those impressions are making certain changes, because as I said you yesterday also, that most of the time we are having certain impressions of certain things that are part of our unconscious mind. When you watch it with conscious mind, the conscious mind try to relate that image with the image that is part of your unconscious mind. And when you are trying to relate those two images all together, it may be possible that there is not a correct impression. We are trying to secure that correct impression, please understand this, of our own personal appearances. I'm having some image, and my personal appearance of that related with that particular image. I'm trying to secure that personal appearance. Very, I'm trying to give it with a very simple example. I'm having my personal appearance, my picture of personal appearance is something different. And I'm trying to secure that all the time. I'm trying to secure that particular personal appearance. But what happens? Sometimes it is not possible for me to have that personal appearance, or I'm trying to secure features of someone who to whom you are very much close with. You're personally interested in that particular thing. You try to keep the features close with you. As I said you yesterday, that there are visual images that you have created in your mind when you are reading certain things. And when you watch that performance in front of your eyes, you try to get that particular appearances in front of your eyes and try to match those appearances with the images that are kept in your mind. You're trying to correlate both the things. You're trying to bring both the things together. When you're trying to bring both the things together, sometimes or most of the times, it is impossible to secure the correct impression, what is in your mind. I'm having a certain picture in my mind. As I said yesterday also, that if you are having a picture of someone in your mind, and you are trying to create that, trying to search that impression, the impression is not going to be the same. It is almost impossible to secure the correct impression of his own personal appearances. It is impossible. Or the features of anyone to whom he is personally interested in. Because we have a different portrayal in your unconscious, and you are bringing some different, you are watching, you are trying to bring something different in front of others. You do not have, you cannot match those things together. You have a certain desire that I should like this particular thing, but that impression is not similar. Because if I make it a little bit uh, familiar to you in the stories that what we heard right from our childhood, how an impression is created in the minds of girls, that a boy coming on a prince is coming on a white horse will take you away as his princess. Prince, the image of prince coming on a white horse remains constant in the mind of any girl, and when she was trying to get married, she is searching that type of prince in her husband. Now it is almost impossible to match that particular image. It is almost impossible to have that particular thing to be appear as it is, or whatever you desire. Your desire is not going to have the same thing with you. Your desire is not having the same idea like you. You don't have the same sort of things appearing in front of you. And that's why it is almost impossible to secure the correct impression. The correct impression of his own personal experience, you can say, or the correct impression of the features of anyone in whom he is personally interested in, nor is it perhaps often desirable that he should get that thing in that particular form. It is not like that. So, for the demarcation of the fields where impulse should be as completely as possible dependent upon and correspond with certain external situation, because there are certain demarcation of fields that you are having. You have demarcated everything. This is how I think this should take place. This is how I think this should take place. I have demarcated every field. See, one person is playing different roles in his life. His father, his husband, his son, his friend. He has to play various roles. And for every role, he has demarcated certain things. These demarcated fields where the impulse for that particular thing, if you have demarcated certain field and if you are getting certain impulse on that particular thing, that impulse is completely or as completely as possible. It is dependent upon the external situation. It is completely dependent upon the external situation. You cannot say that the external situation will change the whole understanding. The external situation will change the whole, uh, you can say, things that has prior in your mind. The references which you have in your mind that has taken certain prior place that an image that you have in your mind about, for example, taking an example from any of the literary work, that an image of a hero that has been demarcated, certain prior notions are part of our understanding. Those prior notions which are part of our understanding, we have certain ideas, and those impulses which you have demarcated to that particular field, the prior images you have demarcated, but certain impulses with an external situation try to change that particular image, try to change that particular understanding, and it may be subordinated to appendicitis with a sort of advantage, the thing which is coming to you, the thing which is becoming with you, the thing which you have with the impulses with an external situation coming to you may have subordinate the prior image that is with you. When it is subordinating the prior image, or it is changing the whole understanding of that particular thing. Now, how it takes place, how it subordinates it, how it changes the image that is in your mind with the help of external situations, how these impulses can make these particular change, complete change as possible. All these things are not so easy to understand. It is not a very simple matter to understand. That is what I. Richards argues. It is not simple matter. Now, many a times, the views of the good and of what should be, that is the result of subordinating the reference to the emotional satisfaction. It is subordinating. How it is subordinating? It is subordinating references to the emotional satisfaction. You are emotionally satisfied with certain things that are with you, but certain things which are coming to you, they are subordinating, they are changing the impulses with an external situations, changing this particular thing in you. And when this change is taking place, you have your idea of good with you, and but the idea of good is not carried in the same way. It is changed. What should be, you think that it should be like this, but it is not like this. You are having an idea of hero, that this characteristics a person carrying should be called as hero. That is the idea which is in your mind about hero. You have an idea about good in your mind, but what should be you are expecting. Now, this what should be, when it comes with an impulse of an external situation, when it appears in front of you in some different format, it is subordinating. It is subordinating reference. This is the result. When something comes to you, you have your prior image in your mind, but you have to accept the thing that is coming in front of you. That means the result is that subordinating reference is somehow keeping or subordinating over the emotional satisfaction. This reference is subordinating the emotional satisfaction. And then there is no chance of question to you. How it is changed. There is no sort of questions you are supposed to understand and ask and allowed. I. Richards is mentioning that you have your own image, impulses, you have demarcated fields, and in that demarcated field, the impulses are trying to change that demarcated field, and it depends upon completely on the external situations to change the demarcated fields where the impulses are entering. It try to change the demarcated field due to that external situations. You have certain prior image, certain prior uh, place where this has subordinated the appearance, it has changed the appearance, it has replaced the appearance. And many times, what you feel good or what should be the good, the result of this impulse entering into the demarcated field to change it is nothing but a subject, a subordinating reference to the emotional satisfaction, and you can't ask any question in this. What is said as truth, as we have seen, what is said as truth has claims prior to all other considerations. Truth claims prior to all consideration. Before considering anything, you have something of truth. And this truth is something different. This you can apply as I said it on a couple of days back when we started with this particular essay. That the image of Hamlet or the idea of Robinson Crusoe, that Robinson Crusoe, who is taking money from the rich and giving it to the poor, he is a fictional hero. And if you're trying to find out this fictional hero into a real life, you will not be able to find out the same truth with it. System, you will not consider Robinson Crusoe as a real hero in your real life. In fictional life, he is hero. But in real life, if somebody is doing this, is he be treated as hero? Truth is something which has its claims prior to all consideration. This is the truth. And that's why I. Richards is saying that truth, it would be said, has claims to all prior, to all other conditions or considerations. And what I. Richards is again making a statement that love not grounded upon knowledge would be described as worthless. You have to understand it. Love grounded upon knowledge, because you have to know what it means by knowledge. We have seen it on the first day. Information or awareness. Because again, knowledge is having an oblique. Oblique is there always. Truth, oblique awareness. Love, information or awareness. So love grounded upon knowledge. You have to understand if it is grounded upon knowledge. Because if you are aware, if you are having information, the impulse of information and awareness, What he's saying, love grounded upon knowledge would be described as worthless. Suppose if you are having an idea of beauty with you, and when you are having an idea of beauty with you, you are having your own mm, understanding and prior image of beauty in your unconscious. And if you are trying to get that idea of beauty in your prosperous wife, and if you are not getting it, you are not having an emotional satisfaction. Or we never admire what is not beautiful in our wife. If our mistress be not really beautiful, when impartially considered, we ought to consider she is impartially beautiful. She is not complete beautiful. You have some other notions to understand it. So what you do, you admire her. You start admire her for other reasons, because the notion of beauty is something different in your mind, and you don't find the same sort of beauty. And when the same sort of beauty, if you don't find, you start to admire her for other reasons, because truth is something different. And if you are loving because you are having a knowledge of all those things in your mind, that I'm loving because the notion of beauty in my mind is something different, which my mistress, which my wife does not fulfill. That's why I'm praising, I'm admiring her for other reasons. If that knowledge is known to, if that knowledge you have about all those things, then it is to be considered as worthless. You're admiring it for other reasons because you know that the notion of beauty is something different in your mind. And you don't find the similar sort of beauty in the mistress, in your wife, in your husband, in your life partner. And that's why Richard says love based upon knowledge is considered to be worthless. The chief points of interest about such views are the confusions, which those confusions make them plausible, because beauty as an internal quality of things is usually involved, and the idea of good is unanal you can say unanalyzable idea. You cannot analyze it. What is mean by good? Analyze it, if I say. If you're trying to analyze the idea of good, you find it difficult because good is an unanalyzable idea. You cannot analyze it so simply because it varies. Its demarcation of field are varies from every person to person. So you cannot have one particular uh, specific idea, one specific notion about good. And beauty is an internal quality of things. You cannot, and then what happens? Because it's a confusion. It is not, you can say, clearly mentioned because points of interest again depends upon person. The points of interest about the things that what is to be called as beauty, what is to be called as good, what is to be called as truth, they are different. For one, the person who is trying to bring certain social changes, certain social reforms, for one side he is supposed to be the social reformer, for other side he is supposed to be the social destroyer who is breaking all the norms. For one he is freedom fighter, for others he is terrorist. So these notions are not to be confined to one particular part because they are confusing, they are confused to it as always having an oblique to it, not the same thing to be repeated, not the same thing, because the notions are not the same for everyone. Our impulses by habits deriving from our desires, these impulses are giving some sort of special twist to these things. What is your desire? Your impulses are dependent upon your desires most of the time. And those impulses, as I said, a sphere, and it is bombarding with an external situations, it is changing. So those impulses, which are derived ultimately from our desires, those impulses are giving certain special twist to it. And that's why the notions of beauty, notions of truth, notions of love are confusing. It is something like a glass of half, a glass full of half full. For someone, it is half filled with water. For someone, half empty with. It varies. Your notion, how your desire is looking at. For someone, moon is his beloved's face. For someone, if he is hungry, moon is something like a bread. The notions are different. It is always oblique. And that's why idea of truth, idea of love, idea of good. This idea is confusing. Because what I. Richards says, that these things they linger in our minds because to think of a thing as good or beautiful, it gives more immediate emotional satisfaction. If you're looking at a rose, which is beautiful, which is good, it gives immediate emotional satisfaction. You are not able to analyze it, why you are satisfied. You cannot ask a question in such question you ask in examination that please analyze why he is good. No. How can you analyze? Why a flower is good? Why? How will you analyze it? By giving its characteristics. For you, those characteristics are good. For others, those characteristics are not good. So it gives more immediate emotional satisfaction than to refer that it is satisfying our impulses in special fashion or something another. You cannot say that. It cannot refer to that. The impulses had made us to feel satisfied because of the fashion, because of something different thing. No. You have to, if you are getting immediate emotional satisfaction, you don't have any explanation to this. Or you can say to think about good or beauty is not necessary to refer for anything. Good and beauty, if you are referring to this particular, then you can able to get the notion of beauty and good for that. No, it is essential. It is not necessarily to refer to anything, the notion of to think about good or beauty. Because what I. Richards is trying to explain that for the term, is trying to explain it. For thinking, the term thinking covers mental operations. If you think I'm thinking, what it means by I'm thinking? This thinking is covering the whole mental operation. Something is going on in your mind. And in this mental operations, you will find out the impulses are completely governed by the internal factors. Now here, no external factor is affecting it. Because when you are thinking, your internal impulses, they are affecting the internal factors. Impulses are affecting the internal factors, and that's why you start the process of thinking. And so there is no reference occurs that, as we have seen, the convulsions are taking place. Convulsions are referentials. You don't have any reference for that, but thinking is going on. Thinking is the impulses are trying to make certain process of simply governing with the internal factors that they have started the process of thinking in your mind. The most thinking I'm thinking of when you say most this thinking of quote unquote, this thinking of includes reference in some degree. It includes reference in some degree, but not all the references. Not all the references that you are carrying in your mind. It refers to some, it's not referring to all. And similarly, you will find out much references would not be commonly described as thinking. Thinking is a specific process, mental operation. Taking something out of that convulsions, that references that are part of our mind, of our mental operations. Something that I said in unconscious or conscious, there are certain references you have kept. And taking some impulses with the internal factors, it tries to create this mental operation, thinking of. And this thinking, which is simply taking place Please understand. I'm talking of two things. I know you may get a little bit of, uh, you can say, no, you may not follow what exactly I Richard is trying to bring it out here. Thinking is mental operation where impulses with impulses which are uh, governed by internal factors proceeding this mental operation, because you're thinking. But if you're thinking of, then ahead you can add anything. Thinking of something, thinking of XYZ, thinking of me, thinking of anything else. Thinking is different. Thinking of is different. Thinking relates with my own understanding. And thinking of relates with the thing which I'm having something in front of me. Here, some references are included, not all the references. Are you getting it? I think that you are getting what I want to say. That thinking is different, thinking of is different. You are thinking. Why you start thinking? Because the internal factors and the impulses derived from coming with governed by the internal factors have started the mental operation of thinking. Whether, take a very simple example, whether to go to the university or not, I'm thinking to get out of this house in lockdown. What is this critical situation of lockdown has taken place? I'm started thinking about that lockdown. Now there is no external things. There is no any reference that is part of you. You are thinking what to do today. I'm thinking. I'm thinking what to do. Now here you will not have any reference, but I'm thinking of a book. I'm thinking of a situation. I'm thinking of some person. In that case, there are certain references that are part of my unconscious. I'm trying to get some reference of it. All the references are not useful for that thinking of process. So when we go ahead with this thinking process, we are using certain references, but when we drop something which is too hot, as I said yesterday, but how you will react, how the impulses will send the message with the sensory nerves to the mind that how to behave accordingly into this particular situation. When you are having a glass of hot water, you will drop it. You cannot hold it, and that's why you dropped it. Now, when you dropped it, you will not say that I have a deep thinking about dropping it. You will not say I'm having a have dropped it because it comes out of thinking. No, we would not usually say that why we have dropped that particular thing is because of thinking. When I am trying to give some reflexive actions, those reflexive actions are not part of my thinking. And that's why you have to understand that the two terms, thinking and thought, thinking and thought, if you're trying to get a definition of thinking, those two things are usually overlap. Thinking, as commonly used, are of different types. Thinking is not having any oblique. Thinking is not having any oblique. But when you talk about thought, thought is having oblique. Idea, plan, meaning of thought. So we have to understand, when you are using thinking, there is no reference used. It is impulse with an internal factor. Impulse to drop the glass because it is too hot to control, to hold. This impulse comes because of the internal factors. This reflexive action takes place because of the internal factors making you to do that particular action. Blinking of your eyes doesn't require any thought process. Breathing. Can you say that I'm thinking of breathing? No, it's a process. This stimulus, this impulse of a yawning, a very simple example. The impulse through internal factors running through sensory nerves reaches to the mind, and mind gives an order that, okay, we require this much additional amount of oxygen, so gulp it, take it. It is not possible to have sufficient amount of oxygen through nose, so open your mouth and get the oxygen done, give it to your body. It is required. It is required for your lungs. And you open your mouth, and without any inhibitions, you open your mouth and take as much as air possible inside. It doesn't require a thought process. It is thinking. This is called thinking. But we are thinking of, you require some references coming into it. It is a process. It is slowly going on. And that's why it is having always an oblique with it. So thought is always having an oblique with it. Two meanings. And you have to apply it very properly. So when we move and when we return to the claims of references, how I. Richards talks about references and how he discusses about references, we'll talk it in tomorrow's lecture. I think it is getting little bit complicated, little bit difficult, not so much difficult. I hope so that you are getting it, you are understanding it. We'll continue it in tomorrow's lecture, my friend, with what he's talking about references and how references are to be used.